morning, everybody. My name is Emma, and you're all very welcome to this, our second literacy webinar, with our guest presenter this morning, Rosie Hogan. In the current times, we in Folens want to help and support teachers in as many ways as we possibly can. So I hope that you'll all benefit from this presentation and take something from it that you can put into practice once schools resume. After our last webinar, which we conducted around 3 weeks ago, we conducted research with participants and areas where teachers would love more guidance on with the research we conducted was how to maximise learning within each colour band so that the children can get the most out of the books. And teachers were unsure as to whether they were moving too quickly through the levels and wanted to know what criteria they should be following in relation to the levelled readers that they have within their schools. So over the next 45 minutes or so, Rosie will be taking you through her presentation on looking at learning opportunities within levelled and banded text. At the end of the session, we'll do a quick Q&A where you can have, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Rosie, we'll try and cover as many of them as we can. So if anything pops into your head throughout the presentation, you can submit a query to the question pane facility available on your screen. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Rosie. So enjoy the presentation and many thanks.
Good morning, everyone. How are you all? We've really hit changing times in schools, and the norm that we're going to face going back into school with possibly small group instruction or literacy lift-off or the normal groups that we do might not happen. And there's a big concern out there about, well, what books do we use? And you know, we have all these books in school, or we might have PMs in school. Do we just leave them? Do we not use them? And I think we have to get our heads around the fact that even though small group literacy instruction might not be able to take place, or literacy lift-off might not be able to take place for a few weeks, months, whatever it is, those banded readers or those levelled readers that you have in your classroom are very essential to the children's learning. And it's making sure that everybody knows how to use them in an effective way in order for children to learn, basically. So let's look at what we're going to do today. We have to think about what balanced literacy is. So look, we all know that we need to have children decoding, reading with fluency. We need to know that they can phrase, that they can comprehend. And remember that comprehension is at the heart of that reading. And that is really, really, really important, because reading is a lot more than just learning sight words and decoding. If children cannot comprehend the text, they're just technically rattling off words and it means nothing to them. So we have to be very aware of that. So what books can you get that are levelled or banded? So your levelled readers are things like your PM pluses. There's also PM photo stories, which a lot of schools don't know exist. They're really, really useful if you have an ASD class, because the pictures are actually real photographs. So children, say, for example, in ASD classes, love that kind of real picture book. PM Gems, PM Stars, they're all levelled. Then there's also now the PM guided reading, which is kind of goes from level 15 to 30. The engaged literacy is levelled, and then there's another one, Blueberry Hill, it's also levelled. They're all levelled schemes. So they go from level 1 to 30, or in some cases 1 to 35, whatever it is. Your banded books are colour banded. Now bear in mind, your levelled books are colour banded as well. In your banded books, what you have are the Collins Big Cats, you have Cambridge Reading Adventures, and you also have Sales. Now the thing is, you can match these all together. So we're going to look at how you can match them in a minute. And I just want to take you through what it means, what's a banded book and what's a levelled book. So levelled books tend to be much easier to progress through. This is because each step is a small step up from the previous one. So each level is a tiny step up from the previous one. And that's the most important thing that you should remember. And every book inside a level 1 is of the same gradient of difficulty. Every book inside a level 2 is of the same gradient of difficulty. With banded books, what you have are 2 or 3 different levels within each band. So for example, in a pink band, that actually is the same as PM's level 1 and 2 or Engage level 1 and 2. So there's a broader range there, and it's a bit harder to tell which book should follow which on a gradient of difficulty. But what you have to really remember is what you do or do not do as a teacher when teaching literacy will determine if the child can access that book. It's not about the book. It's actually about the teaching that occurs within that book. And that's something that we have to keep at the back of our heads at all times. You have to also remember that the quality of the books is much more important than the level or the band. I often go into schools and the first thing the teachers say to me is, oh, sure, they're all looking at the number of the back of the book and they all know what number they're at, and parents are on at me and whatever else. It's nothing about the level. It's not about the level. It doesn't matter. The level is for you in order to assess, are children making progress? But the level means nothing. It's about the teaching. The in-depth teaching of the book is much more important than the level or the band. And if you're measuring your success by the level or the band at which the child can read, then you really need to relook at how you're measuring success for reading. Because just because a child can read a level 30 in first class does not technically mean that they are reading. I have met kids who can rattle off in first class a level 30, but they have no comprehension skills. They have no idea of the vocabulary, no idea of the meaning of the vocabulary that they're reading. They don't know what the book is about. They can't do a story retell. They can't find information in the book for me. They can't sequence. Therefore, they're just rattling words. They're not actually reading. So if we judge, teaching a book is, can the child read it? Well, that's just not enough. We need to think a bit more about that. So it's really, really important. So how does banding actually physically work? Well, there is a publication called Which Book and Why, which was produced by the Institute of Education, and it kind of lists 5 criteria that help determine which band a particular book should be put into. Now, hopefully after today's presentation, you will be able to take this and say, oh, I can kind of look at some of the books and figure out where they go and how they fit into the system. But we'll talk about that as we move further on. So what do they look at? They look at the complexity and the content and the language structure. So they look at how simple the story is based on familiar experiences, or they look at the sentence structures, and they look at the use of clauses and subjunctives and other things that are very important, and the language structures that children have to read. They also look at the book structure, like the number of sentences per page. They look at the types of variations of sentence structures. They look at how repetitive maybe the events in a narrative is. They also then look at the complexity of words and the opportunities to use different decoding skills, or maybe the occurrence of more complex words like compound words, abbreviations, all of that kind of thing. Then they also look at the complexity of the format. So is it a simple storyline, but is there complex sequences? Does it follow? Where's print placed on a page? What's the font size like? Do they use captions, bubbles? Do they use footnotes? Do they use diagrams? Do they use graphs? All of that kind of stuff is very, very important. And then they also look at the illustrations. So sometimes in books, what you find with, say, the level 1 books, that those illustrations give you a lot of high level support for children to figure out words and things like that. But then as they move up the levels, those illustrations change and they just support the meaning of the text rather than giving away words and things like that. So, and then you eventually hit a level where pictures are minimal. So the pictures are, less useful for the children. So it's looking at those changing roles of illustrations as well. Now you will see at the back, if you've got leveled PM readers or engaged readers, you will see how they fit into the colour band. So at the back of all those books, what you see is the numbers. They tend to have most of the numbers back, but what you can see is level 1 and 2 is coloured pink. Level 3, 4, 5 and 6 is coloured red. And level 6, 7, 8 is coloured yellow. So if you've got a child who's reading a PM4, they're technically in the red band. If you've got a child who's reading Engage level 10, they're in a blue band. And you can take that from the back of the books. So this actually helps you fit your PM books or your Engage books or any level scheme that you've got in the school into with, say, things like Colin's Big Cat. You can match them in very easily. So this is how your banded system works. So your pink band, you're looking at Engage level 1 and 2. Your red band, you've got 3 to 5. Your yellow is 6 to 8. Your blue is 9 to 11. Your green is 12 to 14. Orange is 15 to 16. Turquoise is 17 to 18. Purple is about 19 to 20. And gold 21 to 22, white or silver, depending on the scheme you're using, is 23 to 24. Lime and emerald is about 25 to 26 p.m. Ruby is 27 to 28, and sapphire is approximately 29 to 30. So you can take your PM books and you can match them now with your banded books that you have in school, like your Sales or your Collins Big Cat or anything like that. So there's things that you need to consider before you look at teaching anything with the bands. So you need to think about, are children given the opportunity to practice and consolidate things like phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics and decoding, phrasing and fluency, vocabulary building, and comprehension? You know, it's not about anymore learn the words in the book first, and once you can read all the words in the book, let's move on. And I think that's really, really important. It's not a race up the levels. I've often heard children say it, and I don't know where it comes from with kids, you know, oh, I have to get to level 15 or I have to get to level 16. We need to take the level out of it. The level is just not important. It's how much the kids can work within that level is so important. Like, we ignore so many things like phonemic awareness, phonological awareness. The first thing out of our mouths as teachers when the kids come to a word that they don't know is sound it out. That's not necessarily the first thing the kids should need to do. You know, that might be step 3 or 4 down the line, but might not be the first thing that they need to do, because there's so many other things that they can do to get there. Phrasing and fluency is really, really important, because without that, without phrasing and without fluency, they tend to lose the meaning of the text. They need to be aware of punctuation marks. They need to know how to use them, where to put their inflections, and that's really important. They need to build a knowledge of vocabulary. You know, the kids are coming in with very poor oral language skills. Their vocabulary levels are very, very poor, and that needs to be built up. And again, just skipping through the levels and, you know, doing a book a day is no good. We really need to focus in on lots of things inside in the book, and comprehension is absolutely key. They can't comprehend it, there's no point moving on. It's just pointless. So this is your pink band, okay? So pink band books are all kind of, you know, they're the fundamental book for your concepts and skills. They are vital for children to be looking at before they start reading. You've got about 25 high frequency words in a pink band. And that's what it introduces, by 25 high frequency words, which is enough. You're looking at levels 1 and 2 in a PM in this one. This is really with, you know, there's repetitive text inside it. It's highly predictable text, which is, again, it has really clear illustrations which provide full and direct support for the text. The print is larger, there's good spacing between the words. It's definitely punctuated, really fully punctuated, and the text is usually in the same position on the page, on every page, you know, so the kids know exactly where they have to go to. It allows for the development of phonological awareness, because there is, you know, you can do lots of clapping skills and all of that with the kids, you know, zookeeper, you know, clapping zookeeper, elephant, all that kind of stuff can be done. And it also introduces kids to that narrative story structure. So that's the characteristics of what you have within a pink band level. Okay, and I've just outlined them for you, and I'm not going to read through every single PowerPoint or slide that I've done, because you will get a copy of this, but you know, I've outlined them for you as well. So what you're looking at is, if I was judging now my kids and I'm saying, right, are they ready? Are they ready to go on to the next band? I would be thinking of, can they listen carefully to stories? That would be very important. Can they retell me one of those familiar stories that we've done in the pink band? Do they know that letters have different sounds? Can they recognize a lot of high frequency words? Can they locate the title? Can they open the front cover? Can they turn the pages? Do they know that we read a left page before a right page? Do they know that print goes even from left to right? Can they do word-to-word matching, correspondence? Can they do that? That would be very important. Can they find familiar words? So if I call out a word to them, like find the word help, or find the word mum, can they find it? Can they locate those things? Can they use the meaning of the text? Do they understand the text? Can they find the patterns of language? Do they follow those patterns of language? Can they predict the storyline, maybe even some vocabulary? Do they know what might come next? Can they identify the number of words in a sentence? Very important for phonological awareness, knowing the number of words in a sentence that make up a sentence. Can they use the full stop? Do they recognize the full stop? Can they use the illustrations to help them get meaning? And can they identify who the characters are in a book and what possibly their role is in the story? So there's a lot of learning opportunities that occur within a pink band. So, you know, if you were looking for success criteria, you would be kind of looking at things like that to see whether or not kids could actually do that before I would even consider going on to a red band, okay, because it's slightly different. So the red bands are kind of levels 3 to 5. So what you can see when you look at the book that I put up here on the screen, there's more words on the page. So we've gone from just the one line. There's a lot more words on the page. There's an opportunity for a return sweep. So you can even see in that first line up there that return sweep is there. They have to go on to the next line, then they have to go on to the next line. So there's a lot more for the kids now to deal with. There's a lot more text on the page. It's still very repetitive. A lot more characters are definitely introduced at this kind of level. Again, still highly predictable texts. You still have that repetitive sentence phrases. You're looking at now, you know, the last 25 high frequency words that you were introduced in the pink band have now gone up to, it's now 50. So you've got your 25 in pink and another 25. So we're approximately 50 high frequency words. Sentences are very short, they're clear, they're straightforward, they follow kids' speech patterns. Again, illustrations definitely provide full support for the text. Storyline, there's good storyline development, so you can do the beginning, middle and end and all that for kids. Non-fiction text may have more than one type of print format, so you might see with the non-fiction stuff more diagrams coming in and different types of print formats. Again, large print, you've got more of a full range of punctuation, so you've got your speech marks, you've got your commas, all of that kind of stuff comes in. And again, you've got your narrative structure. So there's lots of things. So again, I've outlined for you the characteristics. I'm just not going to go through every single one of them for you. But what happens then within a red text? So you need to get them to do things like locate and recall title. You know, use those illustrations inside in the book. Do they know what a full stop is? Can they use their phonemes to read words like cat and if and up? Have they very secure control over that one-to-one matching? Can they use known words to check and confirm their reading? So that, can they check across the word and make sure that they're right? Are they using a bit more phrasing? And can they track print easier, which is very important? Do they repeat words or phrases or sentences to check? You know, are they doing that kind of thing? Can they predict meaning? Can they predict the syntax and print? Can they sequence the story in order? Can they physically say, this is what happens first, next, then, finally? Can they do that? Again, you're looking at up to 50 high frequency words. And are they are they developing that sound letter sound relationship when they're reading? And that's really, really important. Are they actually physically doing that? So there's a lot of things within a red band. Now that's a small bit that I've given you. There's a lot more that you might get kids to do. But if you went in now into your primary language curriculum, you would find a lot of this stuff, you know, on you know, your learning outcomes, or even in the progression table. They're there. It's not like I pulled this or plucked this out of the sky. It's actually all there inside in your primary language curriculum. And hopefully what you can do is you can take these as a checklist and say, well, yeah, I've managed to cover this kind of stuff inside in my red band book. So that's really, really important for the red band. The yellow band, again, we're slightly different. So we're looking here at presenting children with new vocabulary. So again, the words in the page have definitely increased. We have one new word for every 20 familiar words. So with the yellow band, you get one new word for every 20 familiar words, which means it's kind of introduced gradually, which means basically, lads, that this whole idea of learn the words now before you read the book is knocked on the head, because they're going to see the same words consistently throughout a band. Does that make sense? So they will see, they might start, you might see the word went, and they might not get it the first time you do, say, a book. But they're going to see the word went practically in every single book within that band. So it doesn't matter if they don't get it the first time, they will get it eventually, because they're going to say it a lot. A lot more non-fiction titles at this level build on children's interests. So there's a lot of things that are connected into the curriculum that builds on their interests, whether it's toys or, you know, family, the park, all of that kind of stuff. And there's really good high quality pictures and photographs in the books. There's a lot of repetition of phrases. There is definitely more variation of sentence structure, and that's really important because teachers often come up to me and say to me, oh, I taught him the word come, but he doesn't know the word come in this book. And when you look at the book that he's reading, come has appeared in a different place in the sentence to where he's used to. So he might see come always at the beginning, and then come is in the middle of the word this time, in the middle of the sentence. And it's not because he doesn't know the word come. What has actually happened is the sentence structure has changed. He just doesn't know come in that structure. And that's something that you need to think about. You know, the sentences are definitely longer, so there's a lot more phrasing can be done. There's illustrations definitely still support the text. There's longer, more complex sentences, and there's definitely more punctuation conventions. So you nearly have all of them, like the speech marks, full stops, capital letters. And at this point, I would be expecting children, you know, to understand the different punctuations. So what are your learning opportunities? At this point, you'd be hoping that finger pointing would only go to point of difficulty if they're struggling, that they would be reading now with their eyes, that they notice punctuation more, and that they can cross-check source of information. They can, you know, they can start a word and they can see the word went and they read it as was, and then they go, oh God, it's not that, it's something else because I can't see a T at the end or whatever it is. They can use things like look, familiar words like look, took, to get to, to unknown words. They can use the information in print to predict, confirm or attempt new words. They can see relationships between one text and another. So very often what you find within bands or within different levels, that the same characters appear and they support each other. So there's, you know, they might do a journey in one thing. So he might have a new baby sister and then he goes to the shop or whatever it is. So the characters are used throughout. And they can also retell stories from memory without looking at the book. They can blend their phonemes now. That's really important. They can identify compound words and the word parts that make up the compound words. You're looking at now up to 100 high frequency words. So we've gone from the pink band, which was only 25, to the yellow band, which is about 100 high frequency words. You're looking at common endings like ed, ing, all of that, can they use them? And then we're also making sure that they can do things like the 3-letter words like sit and hit and cat and fat and way and day, that they can read those quite fluently, that they can recognize them and read them quite fluently. Then you go on to blue band. So blue band again, up another level. And then this time now the books are definitely becoming a lot more complex. So they are going to rely a lot less on illustrations. So the illustrations are not as focused in on helping them with words. They're more to derive meaning from the text. They also help the children to read with insight. These books are, you know, they're getting them to think a bit more of inferring, you know, using that kind of comprehension skill. And there's a lot more opportunity to get them to read for expression. Please, lads, one of the things that I will say to you is, you know, very often teachers try to get children to be very animated when they're reading. And that's fine. That is fine. But if their natural voice is a monotone voice, it doesn't matter what you do to that child, you're not going to get them to read fluently. So you're better off asking the children to read in the voice that they talk in. Very often when I take kids for reading, what happens is they actually go up 2 octaves when they're reading. So they actually start reading at a very, very high pitch. And that takes a lot of effort for them to actually be able, you know, to put out the words because they're speaking at this high level. Whereas if you get kids to read in the natural voice that they speak in, what you will get is natural phrasing, natural fluency, and natural expression. And it won't be that high pitched 2 octaves above where they normally speak, which is kind of drives me nuts anyway, but I don't know about anybody else. So in this book, sentence structures are definitely more varied. There's a wide variety of punctuation used at different times. They have to be very careful here because sometimes where the comma is, they might miss it. There's definitely more lines on the text. Stories have a lot more events for children to pull together, so comprehension is really tested in this one. Sometimes there are abstract terms. There's definitely an introduction of more similar looking words, so things like was and saw, on and no, all of that kids get mixed up frequently. They use more phrases like out of his hole, in the sun, those kind of phrases that for our kids aren't, you know, as natural, do you know what I mean, as what they used to be. There's a lot of these books have good, very, very clear, strong plots, which use cause and effect, which is a great way to bring in comprehension for cause and effect. And they also use paragraphs and dialogue to support meaning. So there's a lot more dialogue, a lot more paragraphs, a lot more for the children to cope with. You've also got print now really on 2 pages. So sometimes what happens is, most of the time in these books now, you've got print on 2 pages, whereas in the other levels or bands, print usually was on either the left page or the right page, and there was a picture to support on the other side. Now they have to deal with print on 2 pages, and that's really important, that tracking, that monitoring, that reading on with those. So what kind of learning opportunities do we have through these? So they can move through that text, attending to meaning, print and sentence structure very flexibly. So they know they can do that. We want to see with these children, can they self-correct more? Can they do it themselves without being prompted? You know, if they make a mistake, will they go back, reread, rerun? And will they reread for phrasing? You know, will they reread to clarify that precise meaning? Can they solve words using print information and also the meaning of the word? Because that's important. Just because they can decode a word, if they don't know what it means, it's kind of irrelevant. Can they use analogy more with known vocabulary? So if they know the word look, they can definitely read the word took. If they know the word stay, they can read the word play. You know, can they do that? They need to be able to manage different text genres. So it is important to have a mixture of, you know, your fact and fiction books and things like that. Can they talk about the story in their own words? Can they put a lot more stress on words in a sentence where they're supposed to be? So can they do all those inflections, you know, properly? Can they answer questions about the story to show a deeper level of understanding? So you're looking at, you know, more inferential questioning and evaluative questioning with those kids. You're now looking at up to 200 high frequency words. So, you know, we've gone now from 100 basically up to 200 high frequency words. Can they do inference? So can they infer and talk about character feelings? That's really important. Can they show you evidence? So if you ask them a question, can they find the evidence in the text? Can they actually bring you to that page and say, I know this is the answer because it says? And can they use the pictures to help support those inferences as well? You're also looking at the kids being able to use more complex initial consonant blends. So things like, you know, the SL, the SM, SW, all of that kind of is introduced. And again, you can link that in definitely into word work that you're doing in the classroom. And you're looking at the recognize and using common word endings like ED, ING, ER, all of those kind of things are really, really important. The green band, we've gone slightly further up. Definitely more characters. You know, you've got a lot more different forms of text. You're going to see print written very differently in different pages. You're going to see short sentences. You're going to see longer sentences. There's a lot more information. You're going to see text on the top of the page. You're going to see text in the middle of the page. You're going to see a full page of text at sometimes. Picture maybe might be there, sometimes might not be. There's a lot more compound words. There's longer sentences. There's more punctuation. You've got lots more rhymes, lots more diagrams. They introduce refrains at this point for children to actually read as well, which they're not used to reading. The events that happen in the book are sustained over a longer period of time. So the book has a lot more detail in it. So children's concentration levels have to come up and they have to hold that for a lot longer. They've less familiar vocabulary used. So there's a lot of new vocabulary that is introduced. And this is what you have to be careful of, lads. Very often I've gone into schools and I have met children who are reading a book that is not appropriate to their vocabulary development. So they've got fantastic decoding skills and basically can read the book, but they actually don't know what the vocabulary is. So there is no point giving a child a book if they don't understand and know the actual physical vocabulary or know the meaning of it, because otherwise it's a waste of time. So illustrations only provide a bit of more moderate support for text. They don't actually you know, give them a huge amount of support, which is good that they're there, but they're not the be all and end all. So I have outlined again for you the book characteristics, which I've already spoken about, so I'm just not going to take you through them. But the learning opportunities that occur within this, you're looking at the children being able to read more fluently, attending to punctuation much better for themselves. You definitely want them to solve new words using their kind of meaning and their syntax and all of that themselves. You would expect solving new words would be faster, be more on the run. You would hope that they could track visually additional lines of print without major difficulty. So what you're hoping is that they can actually track that easily enough. Now with some kids, what you tend to find is suddenly there's lots of print on a page and they find that tracking really, really hard. So it's using those, making sure that they can track print, that they don't forget the page on the other side that has print as well. You are hoping that the kids will be able to discuss and interpret characters and the plots more fully. That is really important. If they can't do that, you have to think about where their comprehension level is at. You would expect them at this stage to be able to use a contents page in a glossary in non-fiction books and locate information. So, very often I've sat with those the fact books and I've said to the children, okay, I want to find out about water in this book. What page do I need to go to? Getting them to use that index, getting them to use the features of that non-fiction book is really important. Getting them to talk about characters, identifying with characters is really important. Getting them to notice the words that rhyme. So you still have that opportunity for phonological awareness, even up in the higher levels. Don't ever let it disappear. Get them to notice rhyming words. They're going to be reading text now with unusual layouts like speech bubbles. Can they manage that? Lists, can they manage that? Can they think about the overall plot of the book and talk about how they think it will end? So, making sure that they can do that kind of thing. You're now looking at 250 high frequency words, so it's quite a lot. You're looking at lots of suffixes, blends, compound words, adding endings like est at the end, all of that kind of stuff. Can they do that? Can they look at those words? Can they make connections with lots of different words that are actually physically that they meet all the time, that they're not slowly processing them? And again, you can link all of that into what you're doing in the classroom for phonics and all of that kind of stuff, that they can see the comparisons inside the book. They will find inside this book, again, words that look very similar. That's really important. Was, saw, on and know, they're common ones, but there's lots of other ones that they get mixed up with as well. Watch for children who are reading words backwards and all of that kind of stuff. But there's a lot more comprehension at this level. There's a lot more inference. There's a lot more that you can do with comprehension at this level. So jumping off this too fast is not a good idea. Orange level, we've moved on to. And at this stage, what you're looking at is there's a lot of new words. So there's a lot more new words that are coming in. There's a lot more words on the page. Your stories are a lot longer. So again, concentration span for this has to improve. You're looking at about 250 to 300 words. Now, that does not mean, lads, because the stories are getting longer at this orange level, that they only read half this book, on one day and half on the next day. That doesn't help with comprehension if they only read half a story. It's a full story. So, if I was introducing this kind of book at this level, I would be thinking about doing a book introduction, say on day 1, and talking about the vocabulary, and then maybe on day 2, allowing them to read it fully. I don't want teachers to go back to, a couple of pages, let's stop, a couple of pages, let's stop. Because for some children, they need the whole sense of the book in order for the comprehension to be really consolidated. So, think about how you use these kind of books, the higher levels, because they are longer. They are much longer. So you are looking at, less space between words. There's, more words, less pictures, although the pictures that they do have do support the overall meaning of the text. You're looking at a lot more, literacy language, that they maybe haven't come across. So, words, things that our children don't use normally, or we don't even use normally, like after a while. I would never start talking to somebody and say to them, after a while, that would never come into my natural conversation. I might use it sometimes, but it's certainly not in our children's natural conversation language. Or things like day after day. That's not something that we would normally say, but they're definitely appearing in books. Definitely what you have is sentence structures are definitely more complex, and there's a lot more use of punctuation that they need to read. There's a lot more 3-syllable words, and there's a lot of inverted sentences, things like on Saturday morning, you know, those kind of things that happen. And again, not natural in their own language, but that's what they have to see. So again, I've outlined your different characteristics for you, but I have spoken about them, so I'll kind of pass on that one. But you're looking at the learning opportunities that occur with this orange band. So you're looking at them being able to, you know, get started reading without relying just on the illustrations. We don't want them just to be looking at the illustrations and guessing what they think is in the book. You want them to start reading without that reliance on illustrations. They're going to be reading a lot longer phrases and more complex sentences. Can they manage that? Can they track the punctuation? Can they do that? So can they attend to a range of punctuation? Can they cross-check information? Can they use multiple sources of information in order to cross-check? Can they use syllables within words to read longer words? Can they recognize the different types of syllables? Have they moved on from decoding letter by letter and are now looking at chunks in the words? Can they infer meaning from the text? Can they pull sources of information together from the text? Can they actually physically do it? Can they read sentences that use because, if, so, but, all that kind of stuff? Because they're hard. They're very difficult. Make sure they can read 3-syllable words out loud. Make sure they do know how to clap these kind of words as well. Can they split the story up into sections? Can they talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end? Can they be very clear what happens at the beginning, the middle, and the end? And do they know what fiction and non-fiction means? So if I hand a child a book, can they tell me, is it a fiction book or a non-fiction book? You know, and why? What features does it have? How do you know this is the difference? So at this point of time, you would expect them to know that kind of thing. The turquoise bands are slightly more complex. So there's a lot more increasing use of things like adjectives, more descriptive verbs. You've also got pictures on the page have definitely decreased, but the text has increased, okay? Print is smaller. There's a lot of high interest themes though, however, that run throughout this turquoise band. So you've got more interesting stories. You're looking at now about 450 high frequency words. So we've kind of jumped a good bit at this point in time. So we're now 450 high frequency words, again, repeated throughout. So they, you know, all the words that they've done in the red band, the pink band, the blue band, the yellow band, they're all consolidated still in these books. So if they didn't even get them, you know, down in those levels, they still have a chance to practice them up here. You definitely have a lot more elaborated episodes and events. So there's a lot more for children to attend to. And there's a lot more descriptions, which is great because you can bring in all your adjectives, you know, as well. They might have full pages of print. Some children find that very hard to do. They could have unusual and challenging vocabulary. So this is really important. You need to make sure that the kids can read that vocab that's in the book and they understand it. They include a lot more things like traditional tales, readers' theatre. There's a lot more dialogue. There's a lot more speech marks. There's a lot more opportunities for intonation and phrasing. So there's a huge amount of stuff that goes on in this turquoise band. And they also introduce the irregular high frequency words, which, you know, kids, you know, you can't sound them out. So things like through and, you know, although, all those kind of things that you just can't, you know, get kids to sound out. And it's very heartbreaking when you see a child come to a word like beautiful and they're trying to sound it out letter by letter by letter, because it doesn't matter how much they sound out beautiful letter by letter by letter, they'll actually never get to beautiful. So that's important. So your opportunities that occur within that are that you want kids now to be definitely less dependent on illustrations. You want them to be able to approach the different genres with a lot more flexibility. You want them to be able to use that punctuation and text layout and to produce greater expression. They have to sustain reading with longer sentences and paragraphs and all of that. they're tackling a much higher ratio of complex words. And at this point, you would hope that the children would be very proficient in reading silently in their heads. Yeah, we're terrible as teachers that we constantly, that's an awful thing to say, we're terrible as teachers, we're not. We constantly get kids to read out loud, and yet if somebody said to me to read out loud, I would be very quick to say, I prefer not to. You know, I'm quite the person who doesn't like to read out loud in front of people. We need to teach children how to read silently in their heads. We know we do this thing where we constantly get kids to read out loud in class, and there are children who are genuinely shy, children who don't like it, and there are other kids who love it. But then we ask them to do a drumcondra or a micro T, and they're not allowed to read out loud. So if everything that we do is about reading out loud, you know, when are we going to teach them how to, you know, read silently in their head? They need it for going on to secondary school. They need to know how to read silently in their head, and how to, you know, use that information and take it on. So it's very important by this level that they can read silently in their head, and that it's not always about reading out loud. We want them to be able to read a sentence aloud with correct expression. So I might check those kind of things with them, not maybe read the whole lot, but check those kind of things. They need to know why certain types of punctuation are used and how it affects the sentence. So it's no longer just using the punctuation, but they need to know why and how the punctuation can change it. Because what you would hope is that you would see punctuation now moving more into their writing because they're seeing it in their reading. We want them to be able to decode unusual words by using the signs that they already know, the chunks that they already know. And you've also got that understanding and use of contractions like he's, she's, I've, I'll, you know, I'm. A lot of kids find that really, really hard to read. So, you know, understanding those, what they actually mean, there's a lot of those inside in the turquoise band levels. So that's really important. Purple band then. So purple band's around about a level 19-20. So we've definitely got longer sentences. We've got a wider range of challenging vocabulary. Children have encountered most of the high frequency words at this point. So, you know, we would hope to be moving away from, you know, learning words and that kind of thing. The sentence structures are definitely more longer, more complex. Story plot is more involved. There's a lot more for them to think about. There's a lot more text genres at this level. Some books actually have chapters, so it's hard, you know, there's a lot more reading for them to do. Characters are a lot more distinctive inside in the books. There's definitely a bigger range of vocabulary, and there is, you know, an emphasis on non-fiction features like visual literacy and maps and diagrams and all of that kind of stuff. So they're very different. They're really, really different. So again, I've outlined the book characteristics for you, but I have actually spoken about them there. So I'm looking at the learning opportunities again. So you want them to be able to kind of decide themselves what, you know, understand that layout, the content, how the story will develop depending on the type of story they're reading. Again, back to the reading silently. They should be able to do that, maybe at a bit of a faster pace, be able to track those sentences themselves. You would hope at this point that they could solve most unfamiliar words on the run, that they would be making connections and that they pass that decoding letter by letter. You would hope that they would be, you know, using what they're reading and transferring it into their writing. So that extended vocabulary, the syntax, all of that kind of stuff, you would hope, because, you know, the emphasis now is looking at the literacy effects that are used by the writers and the things that they do, and you would hope that that transfer would happen. You want them to be able to read longer books with short chapters. You also want them to be able to use a dictionary to find the meaning of a word, or even to explain why they think a book is good or not. You know, kids, they have a right to turn around and say, you know, I didn't enjoy that book. I really didn't like it. And you also want them to be able to, you know, segment the syllables, identify the digraphs, the blends, identify silent letters, all of that kind of stuff. And again, that fits in nicely into your phonics. Gold band then are definitely more sophisticated. Then they really challenge the reader. So children who are reading at this level should be able to understand the different types of text layouts, the complex language. Definitely sentence structures are a lot more longer, they're a lot more complex. Story plot might be a bit more involved. There's going to be a lot more feelings coming in from the writer and things like that. There's definitely a wider variety of text genres that are in this kind of particular band. And there's a lot of books with chapters. The vocabulary that they use is definitely expanded. So you're looking at, like, you'd want children to be very fluent on approximately 600 high frequency words at this point. And that's what we're looking at, 600 high frequency words. And we've got things coming in like the suffixes like FUL, LY, TION, those kind of things. Compound words are consistently in it. So there's a huge amount of stuff that's actually in it. It's very similar to the purple band, but it's just slightly more complex. So the vocabulary is definitely more sophisticated. So your learning opportunities that occur within the gold band are very similar to the purple band, getting them to track the punctuation, know what it means, all of that kind of stuff, which we've spoken about before. So the gold band is really the more sophisticated purple band, if that makes sense. And there's a lot more longer chapters, but the vocab at this point is really important for you as teachers to think about, making sure that they understand that vocabulary, making sure that they can use that vocabulary in their own language, making sure that they can talk about it. So just think about that when you're looking at gold band. The silver white bands are silver or white is definitely, you're looking at 1,000 words in a book. That's a lot of reading. A lot of reading for kids, and you're helping them really build that reading stamina by this. So you're looking at things like real life problems and all of that kind of stuff. Definitely a wider range of genres and writing styles. Characters are definitely more developed. There's lots more of points of view that they have to look at. So there's different points of view within the text. Characters may be conflicting, things like that might happen inside it. There's a lot more use and range of contractions like we're, we've, you're, you've, all of that kind of stuff. Definitely inferential comprehension, evaluative comprehension, all of that kind of stuff is definitely, involved in that silver band. So you would hope at this point with silver band that kids would be reading silently most of the time and that they would be sustaining interest longer in text. You would hope that they would be able to use the text as a reference. You'd hope that they'd be able to search for stuff in text more easily, like find the page quickly, maybe even notice spellings of unfamiliar words and relate them. And big thing is, like, make sure they can express opinions about what's been read and offer and discuss interpretations of the text, what they think it means, and be able to back it up with different stuff. And that's really, really, really important. I'm just conscious of time, lads, so I just want to fly on very quickly. And again, read books. Maybe silver white band is read them without pictures or illustrations. They should at this point know things like titles, headings, subheadings, all of that kind of stuff. When you move on to emerald or lime, you are really starting to move into the kind of novelty kind of stuff. There's a lot of inverted sentences in this one. Definitely more of a wider range of text forms. There's a lot more articles, letters. There's an extensive use of fiction, visual literacy features that occur, like maps, timelines, fact boxes, captions, all of that kind of stuff occurs within Emerald. Print changes quite a bit when you go up these levels. So the font could be different in nearly every single book, which is a good thing for kids to be able to read. So there's lots of things that they need to be able to do within that Emerald level. And you want them to notice the smaller details. You want them to be able to pick up the smaller details of what the writer is actually saying. You want them to be able to use different voices for the different characters, that they recognize that mom speaks differently from dad or whatever it is. You want them to be able to tell the difference between the narrator's voice and the character dialogue. You need them to understand those hidden messages. You also need them to read for a longer period of time without losing concentration, and to recognize text types and predict layout and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot that happens at this level. You would hope that they'd be reading silently most of the time, making use of the blurbs. You would also hope that they would be using their books in order to remember the meaning and spelling of unfamiliar words that they don't know, and maybe put them into their reading. And they definitely will have opinions about what they can read and what they can't read. There'll be different styles and voices of different text types, like plays, poetry, narrative, procedural, explanation, all of that kind of stuff is more prevalent in the emerald and lime bands, irrelevant of what type of book you go for. There are two further bands. There's Ruby and Sapphire. They're written more like novels. They have minimal illustrations, more dense text. Now, a lot of schools do continue to use those levels before introducing the children to novels. Some schools kind of, do a mix and match novels and them. that's really your choice. You know, you have to decide what suits best for your own kids. But what is very important is the children get a broad range of experiences when reading. So just going down the route of using the leveled text is fine, but you're not giving them a broad enough range. So, you know, you should be using leveled and banded text together, you know, mixing and matching as they go along, because it can only enhance children's learning. It's better to go broad than to keep going up. You know, so I've often said to schools, if you find that you're flying through the different level texts and, you know, maybe your kids aren't reading, are you not better to go broad and go out than just keep flying up? You know, does a child in first class really have to be reading a level 30? And is that language that's used in a level 30 matching their own language development? You know, is it there? Because if it's not, you need to go broad, lads. All your Folens literacy reps are well equipped to show you how to do this and combine your leveled and banded text in schools. They actually have a page, which I'm sure if you ask them for it, that shows you how you can fit everything in together. So that would be something that you might find very, very useful. So I am going to pass you now back over to Emma. Thank you, lads, for all of your attention today. I hope it's been useful. I hope you can use some of the information that I've given you in schools when you go back. And if you have any questions, Emma is great to answer them.
Super, that was fantastic, Rosie. Thanks so much. There's a few questions and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can.
Okay.
From a teacher, I'm using PM Plus in my literacy groups. Would it be useful to use banded books too?
Yes.
Okay.
The PM Pluses are great. But again, to ensure that children are definitely secure at a level, it's a good idea to throw in banded books, you know what I mean, as well. It's often useful to send home. Some people don't like sending home their PM books because they're the ones that they use mainly for teaching, you know, inside in the group settings. So a lot of schools, what they do is, if they're teaching, say, they've got a group of kids, say, on a red band, so that's, let's say they're reading level 4, they might send home a red band book rather than sending home their PM books, because they need those for teaching in groups. And they might be the books that the kids get home. And that way then you can broaden out their levels of reading as well. But yes, putting banded and level books together, definitely for that experience, is huge.
Okay. What level should my first class be reading at, ideally? Okay.
This is one of the big controversial ones. There is no actual level that your first class kids should be reading at. What I would say to you is level 30 is not matching first class language. Definitely not. If you have a first class child who's reading up around 20, 21, I think that's ample at this point. But it's very much dependent on the children. You also have to remember that you might have kids in first class who are reading lower than that, and that's okay. This is not about, as I said in the presentation, it's not about, you know, there's a level that you have to reach in first class. It's about ensuring that they can cope with everything that needs to be done within that level or within that band. And that's more important than the level, okay? So I don't think first class children should be reading a level 30 unless they have really, really good language and really, really good comprehension. I've seen kids reading level 30, but all they're doing is decoding. So, you know, kind of look at first class, kind of top level, possibly, depending on whether the kids are average, above average, or below average. You know, you're maybe looking at your top level around about 20, 21, 22.
Okay, super. Another teacher, are you better off buying leveled or banded readers? Which is best?
Mixture of both, possibly. Give them a broad range. Yeah, you know, children need to go broad. It's, you know, sticking to the one type of thing. They can all fit together. Leveled, definitely down the school, is very important for beginning to read. You know, those kids in junior infants, senior infants, the leveled scheme is definitely more important when they're at that fundamental stage of where they're learning how to read, because the steps are so much smaller. But as they start getting proficient, there's no harm in throwing in the banded books with the leveled books in order for them to have a broader experience.
Okay. Is there an actual assessment other than teacher observation to assess whether a child can move to the next level or band?
You could do your benchmarking kit that you would have that goes with the PM books. Then that could be definitely used. You could just do a running record. But I think teachers underestimate themselves. Teacher observation is a great thing. You'll know by the questioning, you'll know by working with your groups of children whether or not they're able to move on to the next band. And I think that's important, that we don't underestimate ourselves as teachers and our own observation skills, that we can actually do this. You know, I think we just have to have the confidence that we know what we're doing, you know, so.
Yeah, perfect. Another one, sorry now, there's a few of them. Is it okay to read half a book for homework, or should they read the full book for homework too?
No, I wouldn't be sending home the book that you're working on until you finish with it. So if I'm working on a particular level, so if I was working on a level 23 book, say with a group of kids, it's long and complex and complicated, and there's a lot of vocabulary in it, I would not send home that book until I know that I have done enough work with it, with vocabulary, you know, instruction, with all of that kind of thing. So I would keep that book until it's done, and then I would send it home for them to read it all, because then I know that they can do it. And what would I send home for homework then instead? What I would take then is maybe a book from a band below. So I would look at the colour bands and say, I'm going to give them an independent read from a band below for homework, because I know that then that would be an easy book that they could read themselves. Does that make sense? So not send home the book that you're working on, but maybe look at a band below that and give them a book from that to read, that you know that they could cope with independently, so that they have something to practice at home.
Okay. And what last level would you introduce these levels and banded text at?
I would definitely. So again, it all depends on your children. It all depends on your school. There is no reason why you can't kind of introduce the lower levels into junior infants, say from April on, you know, from after Easter. Those level 1s and 2s, make sure you get word-to-word matching. But it all depends on the school you're in, you know, and it all depends the level that the kids are at. Like in some schools, junior infants are reading up as far as level 5, but you know, they've done a lot of work and they're ready for level 5. In other schools, they're not. And so I think once we've done, you know, we need to look at our primary language curriculum. We need to look at the fact that we've now gone away from having to know all the letter signs in the year. There's a big emphasis on phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. There's a big emphasis on the concepts by print, and we can do that using our level 1s and 2 books. So yeah, if your kids are ready to start reading after Christmas, you know, get them on the PM's level 1s and 2s. If they're ready to start reading after Easter, that's fine as well. But I think setting targets and saying, you know, we have to have all kids reading in junior infants at this time is wrong, because every school is different, and every, you know, the different levels are very, very different. Look at your kids and decide, yeah, April, no, February, whatever it is. So yes, bring them in junior infants.
Okay, super. Look, there's a few other questions, but maybe you might be able to address those by email afterwards. We won't get to them all, if that's okay with you, Rosie. So if anyone did submit a question, we will get back to you at some stage today or tomorrow with that. But on that note, it's 12 o'clock and that's all we've about time for. So just a huge thank you again to Rosie and to all of you for joining us this morning and for giving us your time. I hope you'll all enjoyed it and took something out of it. Our plan in Folens in the current climate is to continue doing webinars with teachers from September onwards for as long as such time as we can't use venues or hotels to host such events. So do keep an eye out on our website in September, late August, September, for any of our upcoming webinars where you can register your interest. Also, we'll be sending a recording of this presentation out to all attendees later on today. And as always, we'd love your feedback. So we're including a little survey. If you have time, it would be great if you could complete it. And it will give us guidance as to where we need to focus future topics for webinars going forward. Again, if you need samples of anything or want to know about any of our offers that we're running or want to just speak with reps, please do so. We're all here to help. Or you can submit your email to info@folens.ie. So thanks again from everyone here in Folens and to Rosie for joining us. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks.